Hi pals, it's me Artie, they them pronouns only, and this week's video is a little bit different to past videos. It's media and it's chronic illness, disability related, but it's real life, however not mine. So I'm going to try and approach this as delicately as possible, but I feel like this story that's been in the media again somewhat more recently is an important one to discuss for numerous reasons, especially for chronically ill and sick disabled people. So I saw this article, it just came up as I was browsing social media, not even really sure where, as this has been an ongoing situation, but I wanted to discuss the story in the headline and also the implications that it has on other patients. I've tried to find as many details as possible because the articles are all a little bit vague, especially on details like pre-incident or at the start of the incident, and some sources are mentioning something that nobody else is mentioning, and I personally am not super great at being able to find and look into legal stuff. I know the laws are quite different as well in the UK versus America when it comes to like privacy and things like that, when it comes to court cases, so I'm not even really sure how available these details are yet or ever. But basically the incident happened in 2021 and it happened over a few months, I think from maybe August until October of that year. Professor Amit Patel eventually dies near the end of October of 2021 at the age of 43, and he has a wife and 2 young daughters. Professor Amit Patel was one of the UK's top doctors in highly specialised fields. A lot of it I personally can't understand or I'm not able to get the grasp of very well, but he works in cancer, in bloods, and stem cell transplants. He was also the first person in the UK to be qualified in stem cell transplantation. I don't know if that's the right terminology. It's unclear from the reports what or if he knew if he was living with a pre-existing condition or not, or if this was all kind of through like self-diagnosis through the process of this incident. So I do apologise if there are things that aren't correct. As I said, the media I've been reading are quite vague on the actual specifics of the medical side of things, and I don't personally know how to access the right interviews or court documents if they are accessible. So yeah, there may be some details that are not entirely accurate or entirely correct. I'm going based off of media that I have access to and looking into some of these conditions a bit more to understand what the implications were of what happened. From my reading, it's somewhat unclear how he presented at hospital that started this whole thing. It does seem like a few sources have said he turned up with flu-like symptoms is some of the quotes. Another one says a throat infection. Each article has been slightly different in wording that I feel I cannot really fully trust most of them when they vary so much. One article made it seem like he presented with very mild symptoms and was aware he was having a rare response or aware he already had a rare condition to be wary of. So like, I need to be wary of picking up infections because of my conditions and because of the medications I'm on. Other articles do not talk about this at all and say all the known diagnoses we discuss in this case were unknown to the patient, Professor Patel, until he was in hospital fighting for the team to listen to him and his expertise. He also may have been given antibiotics initially but again, that is something I've only seen in one source. Professor Patel had HLH. I will refer to it as HLH. He was an expert in this condition. The local clinicians failed to provide the HLH MDT, which is the specialist board of people who help support patients around the UK who also have HLH, but particularly very extreme and life-threatening cases. So yeah, the local clinicians failed to give this board the relevant information on the case, even though that information was all readily available, and that led to the MDT's decision being influenced by a lack of information provided to them. This generally was found to be the cause of Professor Patel's death, was the lack of clear communication with parties that were involved, including Professor Patel, about his current state and current symptoms, leading to the people in the position to advise on his care, including himself, not having enough of the right details to be able to really decide what the best course of action was for his care. This was, the main legal issue at hand, but there was also issues found with how they obtained Professor Patel's consent to doing the procedure that ended up killing him. He was not given the opportunity to provide his informed consent. This is what was decided by the court, to do the procedure which ultimately killed him. His wife, Dr. Tanna, said he was barely conscious when he was asked for consent for the procedure, and there's also conflicting information being shared on whether Professor Patel knew he had this blood clotting disorder called DIC, disseminated intravascular coagulation, before consenting to the procedure, because this can cause uncontrollable bleeding. It was said that he had a 75% chance of recovery before doing this procedure, even though he was not doing well and was not being taken care of very well. But after the procedure, it was 10% maximum. There are some articles that say 1 to 10%. So it seems to be that, the maximum possibility of his recovery after that procedure was 10%. It was also later discovered that the procedure was unlikely to provide any helpful diagnostic information in this instance. In court, the HLH MDT board stated that they did not know the opinions of the hospital staff, or that Professor Patel's symptoms were clearly unlikely to be TB or lymphoma, which are the two main/leading reasons for an HLH crisis, I guess. Flare, trigger is most likely to happen. So because that was left out, they went ahead with the procedure where they may not have done. They also did not know that he had DIC. It looks to be possible that the local treating team were not the ones who presented the case to the MDT panel. Again, that's just from what I've read, and this could have also had elements of why the full picture was not put across. The UK coroner's inquest into this lasted over 2 years and has only recently wrapped up, which is why I'm making the video now. It was, I believe, most of the most recent articles were dated the end of May of 2024. The articles are pretty gnarly at times on the more personal details from his wife, Dr. Shivani Tanna, who is a GP. Things like the ward was understaffed, and Dr. Tanna was often asked/expected to keep an eye on her husband's observations, and administer fluids when she was visiting. But Professor Patel was also regularly denied access to seeing his blood test results. It is Dr. Tanna's belief, and also one that I would personally agree with, that Professor Patel was able to keep himself alive in hospital for longer due to being a doctor, but also specifically being a specialist in this area. She believes that he would have died within the first week of being admitted if he wasn't who he was. Also, the staff at the hospital said he was the least unwell on the ward and didn't qualify for intensive care. So when he did eventually get any kind of transfer from the ward he was on, it was too late, really. Doctors admitted to never treating a case of HLH, and that they would be reading about it. I think as well in this case, why wouldn't you be speaking to the patient more about HLH? He was basically the leading expert in the UK on it, and if he wasn't the expert, he was one of the top experts, as he was also part of the HLH MDT panel and part of the team who created national guidelines on how to treat HLH. And he also said to his wife, "At one point, I'm going to die here." What eventually led directly to his death was the team's negligence and delivering all information of the case to the HLH MDT panel, which led to the panel okaying a procedure with little to no benefits for diagnostics based on his symptoms and health conditions. There have been a few quotes from people of that team who have said it's extremely rare, we were never expecting this. But the HLH MDT panel said that they would never have recommended this procedure if they'd known all the details, specifically his blood clotting disorder, as well as generally all his other symptoms, because they very clearly did not match up with the two main conditions that usually cause or trigger HLH, which, like I said, was lymphoma or tuberculosis. So the symptoms he was having combined with his, I think, also newly diagnosed blood clotting disorder would have turned the panel off from recommending this procedure be done, because it was only a diagnostic procedure. There was no therapeutic benefits to it, and they did say that it was supposed to help find inflammation in the lung. Obviously, I know I'm not a medical professional, but as someone on the patient side of rare conditions who has had to do a lot of self-learning to try and protect myself, it doesn't really make sense to me. And I think that if that was laid out to him, it is very possible that he also would not have consented to doing the procedure either. The procedure led to a catastrophic bleed in his lung. They believe that it could have hit a vein or something as well, and not just been his blood clotting disorder, but a combination of the blood clotting disorder and hitting a vein led to his lungs filling up with blood. Dr. Tanna found him coughing up blood while doctors told him to just lie back. She said her husband informed the doctors that his blood was clotting, so lying back was unnecessary. That particular phrase is something I don't fully understand in the context of this. This is what I mean by the articles have been very confusing to wade through. There are a few things today in some of my scripting that also involved even more rereading and looking for more articles again that made a few things make sense, but there are still some things that I personally don't fully understand in the context of this, and there are some things that I will be missing, but you can go and readily read all about some of the other details. They come up quite a lot in all of the readily available articles. I do think the best articles I've read about this were from the Manchester newspaper, the Manchester Evening News. I feel like their coverage has been the most clear and detailed. Yeah, Dr. Tanna says he looks like a corpse. 70% of his blood was in his lungs. He was freezing cold and he looked like he was dead. The procedure was carried out by Dr. Richard Bouton, a respiratory consultant at the hospital, As he was giving evidence in court, he said that he shared his beliefs ahead of the operation, that it would be unlikely to diagnose Professor Patel with lymphoma or TB. It was also noted that Dr. Bouton did not treat Professor Patel like a patient, and spoke to him in a very academic, medicalised way. In some of the articles, it remarks that it was more like two colleagues having just an academic conversation rather than a doctor / medical professional explaining to a patient their condition and what the procedure would do clearly and plainly to gain informed consent. It also remarked that it is very possible that he maybe was not thinking that Professor Patel may not fully understand the linguistics or context of what he was saying to Professor Patel, but overall he just did not take on the typical patient consent process, which is there for a reason, and the reason is protection on both sides. So I think regardless of who the patient is, this is something that needs to be covered every time for any kind of procedure, but especially for rare and complex cases. You know, obviously I don't know the context of that either, but maybe Professor Patel may have thought that they were just having like a conversation where Dr. Bouton maybe was just trying to learn a bit more about the condition from Professor Patel, or I don't know, like maybe there are lots of ways that could have been unclear to Professor Patel, especially in the state that Dr. Tanna says that he was in at the time. Dr. Tanna wanted to move Professor Patel to a specialist hospital in London. Professor Patel refused, as he didn't want to put the strain on his family to travel from Manchester to see him regularly. And I do think that this would have been a really difficult decision for Dr. Tanna to deal with, because obviously things did not go well remaining at this hospital, but it was his decision to stay and he had his reasons, but that is something that will probably stay with Dr. Tanna for the rest of her life, even though there wasn't a lot she could or should do. There are some vague statements about procedures put in place to deal with bleeding post-procedure, but they do not specify what exactly it was that they put in place and what they did. So I cannot comment on that at all. It was believed that Professor Patel may have had Still's disease, which is an autoimmune condition causing inflammation, which may have led to the immune response of HLH. He deteriorated significantly after his admission in August in 2021. There was strong evidence that his condition was HLH triggered by Still's disease, but Dr. Manson told the court, Dr. Manson was the head of the HLH committee. Dr. Manson told the court that HLH in adults is most commonly caused by lymphoma, which can be the most devastating driver of the illness. Lymphoma, along with infectious diseases including TB, must be ruled out before any other cause of HLH. Basically, ruling things out is the standard approach for all patients, including Professor Patel. Treatment for Still's disease has also not been working. Professor Patel had been growing worse towards the end of August and he was moved to intensive care, the court heard. But from everything I found, there was no specification of what was actually done for him besides the possibility of antibiotics at the start and steroids for a while. So yeah, the only thing I can see is that the team only seemed to put him on steroids, having a short-term improvement, which, yeah, are an autoimmune suppressant and often the first course of action for many autoimmune conditions, but possibly not the correct course for HLH, or not the correct next step, at least, if it wasn't helping HLH. Professor Patel had said that he needed to be on immunosuppressants, but all they put him on was steroids, which, like I said, they are immunosuppressants, but that's all that has been published about what else they did, and most autoimmune conditions require more than just steroids, especially long term. Yeah, so I think obviously they wanted to work out what the cause was. They had to make sure it wasn't other things, but to me it's just strange that they didn't seem to do any other kinds of medical intervention besides steroids. And yeah, it also does not mention the dose he was on or how long he was on steroids for. And yeah, I think it may have likely been just generally slow acting on the team's side, and also not providing all relevant information to that HLH panel. Looking at the current guidelines, which interestingly were published and updated around and just after the death of Professor Patel. They state that steroids and immunosuppressants for treating HLH, and specifically one called anakinra, which is provided via injection or IV, is often beneficial and only needs a short course of 3 to 14 days of treatment on average. He was in hospital for months. He was there from August until the end of October. It was considered off-label for HLH at the time of this case, but was licensed and used for Still's disease, which is also what they thought he could have possibly had that could have triggered the HLH. It is now currently licensed to be used for HLH though. Yeah, you see what I mean? There's just a lot of places where things went wrong and really could have been quite a simple solution, but it didn't happen. In my reading, Professor Patel was said to be an avid patient activist. He did not like much about how the system worked or how it treated patients, and he wanted to change things and improve patient experience. He also helped develop the national guidelines for treating HLH and was part of the MDT board, who oversaw his care as well, but oversees generally all very extreme and concerning cases of HLH in the UK. He was said to be a brilliant teacher, and he was teaching through his illness even though he was very unwell. Obviously that's not something I want to generally support, is, you know, working through being unwell, but it does show that he had this dedication to teaching people about the things that he specialised in. At the end of all this, they decided that the hospital, maybe the teams, as I said, can't find the specifics of some parts, but the fault is with whoever it was that did not communicate these details well to the right people. So it was found that the delivery of information to the MDT board was directly involved with him dying, because that is what led to the suggestion and support and pursuing of the procedure that killed him, but also possibly minorly as well the lack of true patient consent received. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this and share this story as well is, you know, to me as a complex patient, but as well a patient with a rare disease, if a specialist doctor who is nationally, internationally known, to specialise in this condition that he is likely to have whilst he's in hospital, it is not listened to and has been neglected so much that he dies in hospital after months and months and months of this. What hope do normal people have at the moment in the current state of our NHS? And like I said, this was through 2021 and things have only gotten worse in the last 3 years within the NHS. This man was a specialist in his own condition, or at least one of them, his wife was a GP. Their combined expertise and knowledge of medicine could not save Professor Patel from the staff. Obviously, for one, just the lack of staff, not having enough staff around, and I assume as well this was all happening in one of the peak years of COVID. Obviously, a lot of staff were off with COVID at this period of time. That also hasn't improved because a lot of people who managed somehow to work through COVID burnt out and started hating their job so much they had to leave. And I read a lot of GPs and other doctors saying that they want to move abroad because of the state of the way our government treats healthcare professionals, including pay. But it couldn't save him from the negligence, the neglect, the gaslighting, poor communication, and it couldn't save him from death. What can we do as normal people? And obviously I also don't want to make this a what about me, what about us kind of thing either. I just really would like to highlight how scary that is and how dangerous that is, because like he was clearly like a well-valued member of the medical community. He had done so much and was going to do so much, and he was only 43 when he died. But that didn't really matter to the people taking care of him. And if that doesn't matter, then how little do other people matter who don't have all of those qualifications and justifications of why you would value someone. And I think Dr. Tanna kind of said it the best. Honestly, I found this quote as well from her, where she says, "If a doctor who ranks among the best doctors and specialists in the UK is being treated so badly, then understand how other citizens of the UK are being treated by such doctors." And I feel like that also solidified to me they felt okay to talk about this. As a complex and rare disease patient myself, I found that a lot of doctors just don't care. They care to be the ones to diagnose it and care to be the ones to start doing the treatment, I guess, and then they're kind of done after that. And in this situation as well, I'm not even really sure that he even was diagnosed. I'm pretty sure most of these things were like kind of up in the air, hadn't been really confirmed, or were confirmed but hadn't been communicated to Professor Patel directly much or very well. And he, through the articles I read, he repeatedly was trying to involve himself and offer up his expertise for his own care, but was repeatedly turned down or turned away or brushed off. Like the person who said, "Oh, we've never treated a case of HLH, I'll read up on it." And it's like, well, maybe actually the best idea is to sit and talk to your patient first. Ask them questions, especially when he's literally the leading expert in the UK. It'd probably be faster as well than reading or Googling, and more accurate, because as well a lot of studies can take years before they're completed and become available to the public. And then yeah, the weird behaviour of not allowing him to see his blood tests, when I'm pretty sure that's just generally a right of like a patient to be able to see their test results in full. And then this, Dr. Bouton possibly kind of talking to him directly, but almost as like maybe a thought experiment, as a hypothetical and not an actuality. We're all experts on our own experience. It's something we all say, and it's something I do believe in. But imagine being like literally, that's why my brain's not working. I haven't taken my ADHD med again. Like he has all the right things besides being an Asian man. He has all the right things to say, listen to me, I'm the good patient, I'm the right kind of patient. You can trust me, you can believe me. And they still didn't. Because I think even if they had started him on a different immunosuppressant, then I still think they could have found the cause at some point. From my brief looking into Still's disease, it's one of those conditions that basically just requires making sure it's not anything else first, which is so annoying when there's no test to test for a condition. And I think, the factors all just collided and ended up in such an awful ending. And it makes me emotional because that happens every day, all the time, and a lot of families don't get to have a full investigation in a court case. I think the factor of him being like a national specialist and him and his wife both being medical professionals led to that possibility being open of them actually involving law, because a lot of medical staff in the UK get away with a lot of things under, that's just the risk that comes with being a doctor. That's just the risk that comes with getting ill. We're not perfect. We don't know everything. But then day to day, they act like they do know everything and don't have that door open to actually learn about the things they don't know. And then, like in cases like Lucy Letby, for example, there are higher ups, there are admin people who do a lot of covering up work, even when it's really obvious. And again, Lucy Letby's not the only person who's done that. She was inspired by somebody else before her, and there's been a few in the UK over the years. So I don't really have any particular like rounded thoughts or anything on this. Just that I wanted to share Professor Amit Patel's story and say I relate, and that's one of my biggest fears in life. And it's a lot of people's biggest fear, and something they're all too aware of the possibility being quite high for them, especially the more marginalised you are, and the more complex you are, and the more rare conditions you have, or conditions not yet specified. And like my heart does go out to his family, because this stuff is not just traumatizing to the people who are literally the ones it's directly happening to, the bodies that become somebody else's experiment. It's also happening to the family members, and he has 2 young girls who will now finish growing up without a father around. and a wife that he's been with since they, I think, were in medical school. And it's just awful. All the people he's leaving behind, including his patients, anybody else who has these conditions. He really could have changed a lot of people's lives, and now he won't have that opportunity. Yeah, I don't know. I guess this is why I talk about my experiences. Good, bad, how to deal with it, how to get somebody to actually listen to anything you fucking say, because these things happen all the time. They just don't end up in the media very often. And I wanna, I don't know, I didn't have the opportunity or ability to go into medicine. I'm not sure I would have been able to anyway. I don't think I could deal with trying to do blood tests on people even before I was really badly traumatized in that department. I was just generally squeamish and almost passed out a few times from that. So like, I can't change things from a doctor or other medical professionals position. But I can do what I can as like just a normal person, just some person who goes through some bullshit because of some unlucky, I don't know what, biology, genetics or whatever that ended up with me being this way. And you all know I fight for my NHS. I fight for doctors, nurses, medical professionals. They deserve better. So do we as patients. And a lot of the times the medical professionals are a major problem. And it just needs to fucking change. It just needs to change. He did not need to die. So many people did not need to die. There are ways that people could have been helped and saved well within our capacity. And they just aren't. Because of either someone's ego or some useless and unhelpful like bureaucracy put in place. So yeah, I could carry on ranting, but I'll probably just keep going in circles and saying the same thing and things I've probably said in other videos. So that's my video for this week. Another video that feels weird to say this at the end, but don't forget to support the channel. Liking, watching, commenting, subscribing and sharing my videos, you know, really helps. If there is anything I've missed that you know I've missed or you would like to share about this case in particular, feel free to link me in the comments. And as well, if you are UK based, or maybe not even UK based, but you know how to access court proceedings and stuff like that that are open to the public, and wouldn't mind letting me know how, I would appreciate that, because that is definitely something that I'd like to learn more about, and I don't know, maybe talk about cases like this that come up in the media more often. But yeah, that's it for this video. I'll see you next week. Bye.